So, with Deltarune Chapter 2 now out and the entire game of Deltarune on the horizon, most people are getting back into the Undertale series, and with good reason. I mean, the game on the surface just seems like it has a basic plot, but once you dig deeper into it, you'll find that it has the greatest lore that could be done in a video game series. Deltarune seems to expand on this lore, and many people aren't necessarily caught up with everything Undertale lore-wise, especially in regards to everybody's favorite character, W.D Gaster. If you played Undertale or Deltarune casually, the chances are you've never heard of this name before, but if you get involved in the community a little bit, you'll probably hear the name here and there. It isn't until you dive deep and do your own research on the lore that you find who this character is. And well, don't worry, it isn't your fault. Gaster lore is purposely made to be hard to decipher, and you'll probably never encounter anything Gaster related on your first playthrough of these games. However, as time goes on, it may be crucial to know this information and lore about Gaster. Of course, you could do your own research on this character on your own, but it isn't really well documented anywhere in one specific location. So in this video, I'll be going over everything that has some kind of relation to Gaster. I'll try to stick to mostly factual stuff in this video, so don't expect too many theories or predictions from me this time around. We'll start with the most well-known facts about Gaster, and then slowly drift into the lesser-known stuff about the character. Again, this isn't a theory, these are just facts presented in the Undertale canon that is up to your own interpretation. Make sure to subscribe and like. Now, enjoy the video. Okay, let's cut to the chase by starting off with the name. For those that played Undertale, I'm sure you know about Sans and Papyrus. Both are named after a font and both speak in their own respective fonts. These are the only two out of the three characters that speak in different fonts than everyone else. The third one being W.D Gaster, except W.D Gaster is actually two fonts, with the W.D standing for the Wingdings font and Gaster standing for the Aster font. If you enter the name Gaster in either Undertale or Deltarune, the game will reboot instantly. The name W.D Gaster comes from a set of Gaster Followers, which I'll start going over now. But before we talk about Gaster Followers, we need to talk about the fun value in Undertale. Undertale is a game based entirely around decisions. There are many routes to take in this game, not just pacifist or genocide, so those that want to get the multiple endings will need to replay the game over and over to get their desired result. Of course, playing the same game 93 times in a row can get a little bit boring, so to spice things up, Toby Fox added in something called the fun value. Anytime you start up a new game of Undertale, a new fun value is generated, and you're randomly assigned a number between 1 and 100. Each value can have a different effect on your playthrough, from getting a joke call from Sans or getting the wrong number song. However, in the fun value, this is where a lot of our Gaster information comes from, so I hope you remember the fun value because we'll be referencing it a lot in this video. Alright, now that you know about the fun value, let's go over the Gaster Followers. So in the fun value chart that you see on screen, there are a couple of values that have a bunch of grayed out NPCs associated with them. If your fun value lands in the 60 to 64 range, you'll likely see a Gaster follower on your playthrough. Each Gaster follower will provide you with a different dialogue that speaks upon Gaster's backstory. I'll read each one of them off now. Alphys might work faster, but the old royal scientist, Dr. W.D Gaster, one day he vanished without a trace. They say he's scattered across time and space. How can I say so without fear? I'm holding a piece of him right here. It makes sense why Asgore took so long to hire a royal scientist. After all, the old one, Dr. Gaster, what an act to follow. They say he created the core. However, his life was cut short. One day, he fell into his creation and... will Alphys end up the same way? I understand why Asgore waited so long to hire a new royal scientist. The previous one, Dr. Gaster, his brilliance was irreplaceable. However, his life was cut short. One day, his experiments went wrong and, well, I needn't gossip. After all, it's rude to talk about someone who's listening. From this dialogue, we can gather a lot about Gaster's past. This is just the start of the Gaster mystery. I promise it goes even more deeper than this. Yeah, you may have noticed by now that I've been using this sprite a lot. This is the most widely accepted sprite of Gaster on the internet. This sprite also comes from the fun value chart, and you can only see this sprite in your playthrough if you are extremely, and I mean extremely lucky. The only way to get this sprite to appear is to have a fun value value of 66, and even at that, you may be unlucky and the door that holds the sprite may not even appear for you because it has a 10% chance of spawning in. However, if you are lucky enough and you get the correct fun value and fall into that 10% chance, you'll get the additional hallway and a door. Upon entering the door, you'll gain another additional room where this figure will literally just stand in the center. If you interact with this figure, the figure will do this. Nothing else really happens here, but based on that event, specifically the sound that plays here, makes many people determine it's Gaster. However, what I'm about to show you isn't completely solid evidence, although most people do in fact consider it solid evidence, but I'm going to be upfront here and say that there has never actually been confirmation that this character is Gaster. That's just the most widely accepted thing. The only actual official confirmation we got with this being Gaster was an officially released tarot card for merchandise, and even at that, we can't take that as canonical because for one, merch isn't canon, and for two, it wasn't designed or even approved by Toby. That's why when Toby found out, the card was completely removed to avoid misinformation. Anyway, back on track, many people will agree 100% this is Gaster because of the sound that plays here. This little jingle that played before Gaster disappeared is actually a sped up version of Gaster's theme. Yeah, that's right, Gaster has his own theme in this game, but you didn't see that coming. Going back to the fun value chart, if your fun value lands on 65, the room with the fishing rod will be changed to a sound test room. This sound test room sounds pretty fun to play around with. You can play many different themes here that you won't hear anywhere else in the game. However, there's one theme here that stands out above all the rest, and that's Gaster's theme. This is where Gaster's theme can be played, and I'll play it for you now. A fun fact about Gaster's theme is that you probably heard it before, as the theme is a commonly used leitmotif, and you can hear it in almost every theme in the Undertale soundtrack. Here I'll play a sample of Muffet's theme that has the leitmotif. Although it's hard to say if these leitmotifs are intentional or not because Gaster's theme is literally only 4 notes. Gaster's theme is labeled as him.ogg in the game files. So yeah, now you know that this jingle is simply a sped up version of Gaster's theme. Maybe you're convinced now that this character is Gaster. But we're not done with the fun value chart just yet. We still have a little bit more to cover before we wrap things up with this chart, because this isn't the only place this sped up version of Gaster's theme is played. Also in the fun value chart exist these things called goners. Now goners are a whole different beast to tackle and I won't go too far deep into them, but most people get them mixed up with Gaster Followers and with good reason. So basically there are 2 sets of goners in the fun value chart, Goner Kid and Goner Clam Girl. Let's start with Goner Kid. You'll notice that Goner Kid has similarities with the Gaster Followers immediately, and upon first glance people will instantly assume this is a Gaster Follower. However, there are differences between Goners and Gaster Followers. When speaking to a Goner, they'll never give any background information on Gaster or even remotely mention him. Goner Kid just seems accidental and Goner Clam Girl is just confusing. Goner Clam Girl actually foreshadowed the release of Deltarune, where she hyped you up meeting somebody named Susie, but you'll never meet this Susie in Undertale. In the Nintendo Switch version of Undertale, Clam Girl was changed, and after her dialogue was finished, she turned gray, disappears, plays the sped up version of Gaster's theme, and says you'll be meeting Susie soon. Deltarune Chapter 1 was released that same year. Well, back on topic, I wanted people to understand the differences between Goners and Gaster Followers, as it's likely the difference between those two will probably be more important in the future of Deltarune. Alright, and with that, we're finally done with everything that has to do with the fun value chart. Finally, go pat yourself on the back because my god, that took forever. Now we can move on to the game files. Alright, let's start with everything in the game files that has to do with the battle system. For starters, Gaster seems to really like the number 6, as his battle stats are all just 6s, although Gaster is never encounterable in game. Secondly, Sans' battle also has some interesting Gaster related stuff. As you know, his blasters that he uses on you during his battle in Genocide is actually labeled in the game files as a Gaster blaster. This implies that Sans has some kind of relation to the Doctor as well. And that's pretty much everything Gaster related in the battle system of Undertale. Not that much, I know, but we're about to enter some big territory in the game files. But before we can talk about that big territory, we need to go over the entries. If you've played Undertale and have gotten the true pacifist ending, it is is likely that you're familiar with the entries in the True Lab. Each entry is implied to be written by someone, although nobody actually knows who that specific person is. But it's very highly likely that this person is Alphys. It's typically up to speculation and theories as to who actually wrote this entries. Each entry is labeled entry number 1, entry number 10, etc. But there is one entry missing from this list. That entry is entry number 17. In the game files of Undertale, there exist two separate entry number 17s. The first one gives insight into some additional lore about what happened during Alphys' experiments in the True Lab, and the other entry number 17 is an entry written by Gaster. This is one of the few times we can actually hear Gaster speak. The only way to access this entry is to mod your game to room_264. When you load up a save, you'll then be greeted with a bunch of wingding font symbols, and you can hear Gaster speak as well as a very ominous noise plays in the background. If you've played Deltarune, you'll probably find this noise familiar, as it's the same noise that plays on the cell phone if you use it in the dark world. What plays here is basically a slowed down and reversed version of Muppet's laugh. For the actual entry itself, I'll provide an accurate translation for you now from Wingding's font. Entry number 17. Darker, darker, yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? This is one of the only times we have heard Gaster speak, but it also wouldn't be the last, as there are other factors in the game files of Undertale that also have Gaster speak. There exists another unused room in Undertale like in entry number 17, but this room is labeled as room_272. This room is completely blank, but with one figure inside of it. This figure looks nothing like the Gaster established earlier, but you can interact with it. It actually speaks in Wingding's font here. All it says is just redacted. If you leave the room, it will take you to the sound test room I mentioned earlier in this video. This isn't the only time this figure appears, as there is also an unused horse stable in the game files of Undertale as well. This unused horse stable is pretty much useless for the most part, but if you open the horse stable up with an unused key, you can find the same figure from before. However, this time it only says X in lowercase Wingding's font. There has always been a debate among the community as to which figure here is actually Gaster, and honestly at this point I'd say it's pretty much up to your own interpretation, as both have solid evidence to support that they're Gaster. Let me know in the comments as to which one you think it is. Alright, and with that we finally covered everything in the game files, and we also covered every evidence regarding Gaster from Undertale. Now, let's dive deep into the Deltarune evidence of Gaster. To start off with the Deltarune evidence of Gaster, let's look at some parallels of some information being brought over from Undertale. The first piece of evidence is that if you name your vessel Gaster, the game will reboot, just like in Undertale. Also in the game files, the vessel's name is labeled as Goner, just like Goner Kid and Goner Clam Girl. Now the next piece of evidence brought over from Undertale is a little bit more confusing. You see, before Deltarune was even announced years ago, if you went to Deltarune.com, you would actually be greeted with Wingding's text, which means that this is Gaster typing. It reads, "Three heroes appear to banish the angel's heaven." Going on to the Twitter side of things, before the launch of every new chapter of Deltarune, the Undertale Twitter blacks out and sets their username to a bunch of squares. If you count the squares that replace the username, you'll get the same amount of characters as Gaster's name. Yikes, and we haven't even gotten into the game itself yet, and we've already got a lot of information from just that. Alright, with introductions out of the way, let's move on to the game itself. Firstly, the music that plays at the beginning of Chapter 1 is called Another Hymn.ogg. This is parallel to hymn.ogg, which is the file name for Gaster's theme that I mentioned before. If you call the cell phone in the dark world, you can hear a sample of muse_smile.ogg from entry number 17, which I've already established, but this theme can also be heard towards the bunker. The bunker is an extremely slowed down version of muse_smile, and if you sped the bunker noise up by 666%, you'll get the same muse_smile that you hear from the cell phone. Nextly, there exists an egg in both Deltarune Chapter 1 and in 2. The egg is believed to share some kind of relevance to Gaster, but the only parallels we've gotten with the egg is that the person that gives it to you is called the Man. Now to wrap all the Deltarune evidence up, let's talk about secret bosses. After you beat Jevil and you go back to Sham, they will have additional dialogue. Sham says that Jevil was just a normal person and they were actually friends at some point. This is until Jevil met someone and Jevil then went slowly insane. Sham says that after Jevil went insane, their view on the world got darker yet darker. This is an exact quote from entry number 17, scene from Undertale. Spamton had something similar happen to him. After beating Spamton NEO in the normal route, if you go back to his shop, you'll see a bunch of merchants there with no face. Each merchant will provide you with Spamton lore and how he became insane. They claim that he always had dreams to become a big shot. His dreams would become true once he received a phone call from somebody unknown that effectively gave him what he wanted. However, the merchant claims that on the other end of the line was nothing but garbage noise. In Deltarune Chapter 2, the cell phone's dialogue was changed from that of Chapter 1. In Chapter 1, if you call it, it says it doesn't appear to be working after getting Muse_Smile. However, in Chapter 2, after you get Muse_Smile, you'll get dialogue back saying it's nothing but garbage noise. And well, you are now officially caught up with all of Gaster lore. Thank you for watching and